For more than a century, one question has been echoing out from a frozen river in St. Petersburg. How did Grigori Rasputin really die? Today, we're opening the cold case file on one of history's most sensational murders, a crime that, you'll see, still holds on to its secrets.
So our story starts not with a life, but with a crime scene. When this body was pulled from the ice, it wasn't just exposing a murder, it was lighting the fuse on a revolution that was about to change the entire world. The victim, of course, was the infamous mystic Grigori Rasputin. And that's the real mystery, isn't it? How did a political assassination get twisted into this supernatural legend? To get to the bottom of that, we have to start with a story that was very deliberately crafted for the world, a story told by the killer himself.
Okay, let's dig into the official version of events, the one that was meticulously put together by the lead conspirator, Prince Felix Yusupov. This is the story he wanted everyone to believe.
I mean, you gotta understand, Yusupov was the husband of the Tsar's only niece. He believed Rasputin was this complete charlatan, a puppet master pulling the Tsarina's strings and just leading the whole empire to ruin. So he decided the only way out was to take matters into his own hands and plan the perfect murder at his incredible Moika palace. So this is the official story. And honestly, it reads more like a dark fairy tale than a real confession. Yusupov claimed he started with poison, but when that somehow failed, he used a revolver. But then, he says, Rasputin demonically revives, which leads to a chase, a brutal beating, and then finally, a drowning in the frozen river. This was the wild story he sold to the world. Not a simple assassination, but an epic battle against evil itself.
And that quote right there, it perfectly captures the goal. Yusupov wasn't just admitting to a crime, he was framing himself as the hero in some kind of mythic battle. He had to justify killing an unarmed man in his basement, so he painted Rasputin as a supervillain who just refused to die.
But stories, no matter how good they are, have a funny way of falling apart under a little bit of scrutiny. And when forensic science meets mythology, well, that's when the truth really starts to come out. And here is exactly where the story completely collapses. The official autopsy report demolishes the two most dramatic parts of Yusupov's tale. There was no poison in Rasputin's stomach, and there was no water in his lungs, which means he was dead long before he ever hit the river. To make it even less likely, Rasputin's own daughter insisted her dad never even ate sweets. The legend was already crumbling.
So what gives? Did Rasputin have some kind of mystical immunity? Was it divine intervention? Well, the answer, it turns out, isn't supernatural at all. It's actually a pretty simple and fascinating chemical reaction.
This is where the story gets really clever. You see, Yusupov's failure probably wasn't a sign of Rasputin's strength, but it was very likely a sign of the conspirators' incompetence. It's entirely possible that the poison Yusupov served had degraded a long time ago into a totally harmless powder. The cyanide wasn't resisted, it just wasn't there. Rasputin wasn't superhuman, he was just eating some perfectly normal and probably delicious cakes. So, if he wasn't poisoned or drowned, how did he die? The autopsy is brutally clear. Homicide by firearm. The report identified 3 bullet wounds from 3 different guns. This wasn't one man's struggle against a demon, it was a group execution. 2 of the shots were messy, fired into his side and back, but that third one, the one to the forehead, that was different. It was a close-range, precise killing shot. The kind of shot you'd expect not from some panicked nobleman, but from a professional. And this one detail opens up a whole new line of inquiry. Was there another shooter in the palace that night? The evidence for that third shooter, it turns out, doesn't point to another Russian aristocrat. No, it points to a foreign power with a huge stake in the future of Russia. So, let me introduce you to Oswald Rayner. He was an old friend of Prince Yusupov's from Oxford. He also just happened to be a British intelligence agent stationed in St. Petersburg right in the middle of World War I. Okay, when you lay out the evidence, a really compelling picture starts to emerge. We know Rayner was at the palace that night. Ballistic analysis suggests the fatal shot came from a .455 Webley revolver, which happened to be Rayner's weapon of choice. Decades later, his own driver admitted the killer was an Englishman. And maybe most telling of all, Rayner burned all of his personal papers before he died. The theory is,
When Yusupov's chaotic plan failed, the professional in the room stepped in to finish the job. And why would Britain even care? Because Rasputin's death wasn't just about Russian court drama. It was about the fate of the world. Rasputin was pushing the Tsarina to make a separate peace with Germany. For Britain, if Russia pulled out of the war, it would have been absolutely catastrophic, freeing up hundreds of thousands of German troops for the Western Front. Keeping Russia in the fight was their #1 priority. And yet, if you search the official archives for proof, you'll find exactly this: 0. Not a single document linking Rayner or any other British agent to the murder. Now, this isn't necessarily proof of innocence. For a lot of historians, it's actually proof of an incredibly successful and thorough cover-up. You know, Prince Yusupov and his co-conspirators, they really believed that by killing Rasputin, they would save the monarchy. They thought they were cutting out a cancer to save the patient. But they were so tragically, fatally wrong. Just look at this timeline. The assassination didn't save the throne. It became the final nail in its coffin. The murder of a peasant, a so-called man of the people, by a group of rich nobles, well, it was the last straw for an already furious public. It confirmed their worst suspicions about the corrupt aristocracy and just sped up the monarchy's collapse. And then there's the prophecy. Whether it's real or just a legend, a letter was supposedly found after his death with this message for the Tsarina. And chillingly, his dark prediction came true with terrifying accuracy. Within just 19 months, the entire Romanov family was gone. So we have a much clearer picture now, right? A political hit, maybe carried out with help from foreign intelligence, that backfired and actually hurried along a revolution. So why does the myth of the unkillable mad monk still persist? The answer is pretty simple. The legend was a better story. Felix Yusupov lived a long life in exile, and he basically dined out on his fame as Rasputin's killer. He wrote books, he gave interviews, and he was always embellishing the tale. An epic struggle against a demonic mystic was way more heroic and profitable than the sordid truth of a botched assassination in a palace basement. In the end, the case of Rasputin's death shows us that history isn't just about what happened. It's about who gets to tell the story, what details they choose to include, and what they decide to leave out. The truth might not be buried in a frozen river, but in the calculated myths that were created to obscure it.